The alarms shattered the silence as the Aurora's sensors flared to life. "Captain, we've got something." Lieutenant Mara Finn's voice crackled over the comm, tense with disbelief. "It's not just a signal, it's voices, dozens of them, maybe hundreds." Elias Voss strode to the console, his reflection fractured in the flickering screens. The audio feed spilled into the bridge, whispers layered over whispers, a cacophony of pleas in tongues no dialect bank could parse. "Help us," they begged, syllables twisting like smoke. The source nowhere, everywhere. The rift yawned beyond the viewport, black and endless. Finn's fingers hovered over the navigation controls. "Orders, sir." Outside, the stars seemed to blink slow, deliberate, as if something had just opened its eyes. The static-filled whispers coiled tighter as Dr. Lian Zhao's fingers danced across the holographic interface, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's structure beneath the chaos," she murmured, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. The bridge lights dimmed as the AI projected her findings, frequency patterns collapsing into numbers, numbers into coordinates. A single point in the void. Finn exhaled sharply. "That's the old Selene research station, decommissioned decades ago after the first Rift expeditions." Vanished. Voss didn't hesitate. Helm, new heading, full burn. A chorus of protests erupted. Chief Engineer Kale gripping his wrench like a talisman, Security Officer Draven silently shaking his head. "It's a graveyard out there," Kale growled. "Even if the station's intact, radiation levels'll fry our systems within minutes." But the captain's gaze never left the swirling abyss beyond the viewport. "We answer the call," he said quietly. "That's why we're here." The Aurora pivoted, engines screaming as it carved a new trajectory, and then the voices changed. No longer fractured pleas, but a low, rhythmic chant, syllables syncopated like a heartbeat. Finn's hands trembled as she adjusted the gain. "They're not just repeating coordinates anymore," she whispered. "They're counting down." The docking clamps shuddered as the Aurora locked onto the derelict station's airlock, the metal groaning like something alive. Finn's grip tightened on her sidearm, pressure seals still holding. She reported, though the readings flickered erratically. Voss led the way, his boots sinking into a layer of frost that crackled unnaturally underfoot, not ice, but something thicker, darker, clinging to the walls in jagged tendrils. The station's corridor stretched before them, its lights long dead, replaced by the erratic glow of their helmet lamps. And then they saw the marks, deep, parallel gouges raked across the bulkheads, as if something with claws had torn through the metal in a frenzy. Dr. Zhao's voice cut through the static in their comms. "Captain, there's a data terminal ahead still powered." The screen flickered to life under her touch, revealing a fragmented log entry. A hollow-eyed scientist stared back, her voice distorted by time. "Day 47, resonance experiment successful," but the rift answered. The feed skipped, her face contorting. "They're not whispers, they're shapes now." The transmission cut to static, leaving only a single line of text: "Containment failure. Protocol Omega initiated." Jack's Mercer's sharp intake of breath snapped their attention to the far wall. He crouched beside a ruptured panel, his scanner casting an eerie blue glow over a gaping hole in the station's inner hull. "This wasn't damage," he muttered. "This was chewed through." His glove brushed the edges. Jagged, uneven, the metal warped outward. Something breached containment from the inside. A drop of liquid hit his visor, thick and iridescent. He looked up just as the shadow above him twitched. The corridor light surged once, a dying gasp, and in that split second they all saw it. Not a shadow, not a trick of the dark, something coiled along the ceiling, limbs too long, too jointed, its skin drinking in the light. then the darkness swallowed it whole. Mercer's voice was a razor's edge. Move now. Behind them, the station's speakers crackled to life. The same chorus of voices from the rift now harmonizing into a single, deafening note, a siren song calling them deeper into the gutted heart of the station. The corridor plunged into darkness so complete it felt like the void itself had swallowed them whole. Only the erratic pulse of helmet lamps cut through the black, illuminating Dr. Mara Cole's gaunt face as she lurched from a ruptured maintenance shaft. Her lab coat hung in tatters, streaked with the same iridescent fluid they'd seen earlier. "You shouldn't be here," she croaked, her voice raw, as if she'd been screaming for hours. Voss reached for her, but she recoiled, her bloodshot eyes darting to the ceiling. "They're coming back. They always come back when the lights go out." Finn's breath fogged her visor. "Who's they?" Cole's laughter was a broken thing. "You heard them, the voices. They're not lost, they're hunters." Her fingers dug into Voss's sleeve, her nails cracked and bleeding. The rift doesn't just echo. It learns, it takes what you love and wears it like a skin. A guttural screech echoed down the corridor, distant but closing fast. Cole's head snapped toward the sound. "Too late, they know you're here now." The emergency lights flared, casting the hallway in a sickly crimson glow. Shadows pooled and slithered where they shouldn't, coalescing into shapes that flickered at the edge of vision. Then the whispers began, not from the comms, but from the walls themselves. Finn stiffened as a voice, achingly familiar, curled against her ear. "Lena." "Sweetheart, why won't you look at me?" Her mother's voice, dead for 12 years, Draven swore, backing into a defensive stance as another whisper slithered past, this one mimicking Kale's youngest daughter, giggling. The engineer's face went ashen. "It's in our heads," he muttered. "It's using us." Cole staggered toward a shattered console, her movements frantic. "The station's core, it's not just power. It's a cage, and you just walked into it." The lights stuttered again, and the temperature plummeted. Frost spiderwebbed across Mercer's visor as something heavy thudded in the vents above them. The whispers rose to a chorus, a dozen loved ones calling, pleading, lying. Then the vent cover tore free with a scream of metal. Cole met Voss's eyes one last time, her lips shaping a single word: "Run." The Aurora's emergency klaxons wailed as the crew scrambled back through the airlock, their boots slamming against the deck plating. Patel's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a vibroblade. "Seal it now." The heavy doors hissed shut just as something slammed against them from the other side, the metal buckling inward with a groan. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a sound like fingernails dragging across steel. Finn's hands flew over the security console, her breath coming in short gasps. Life signs in the cargo bay: 7, no, 10, wait. The numbers flickered wildly, doubling, halving, as if whatever was aboard couldn't decide how many of it there should be. A scream echoed through the ship's comms, cut short by static. Mercer's rifle was up before the sound faded, sweeping the shadows of the corridor. "They're inside," he said, too calm. The first one rounded the corner at the far end of the hall. Patel's pulse rifle barked, the rounds punching clean through, only for the wounds to ripple shut, the creature's flesh flowing like liquid. It staggered, then righted itself, limbs elongating, its face melting into something eerily familiar. Zhao's breath caught. That's Ensign Heron's uniform. But Heron was dead, left behind on the station when the vents collapsed. The thing wearing his face smiled, its teeth too many, too sharp. Then the ship's AI sputtered, the overhead lights strobing as a chorus of whispers flooded the intercom. Not just the Rift's voices this time, their voices. Patel heard her own dead sister cooing her childhood nickname. Kale's console erupted in warnings, the display warping into a grotesque mimicry of his daughter's face. her lips moving in sync with the AI's distorted voice. "Daddy, why won't you let us in?" Zhao slammed her palm against the mainframe access port, her implants flaring as she brute forced a firewall. "They're not just adapting to our weapons," she hissed. "They're hijacking the ship's systems, learning our memories, our weak points." The deck lurched beneath them as the artificial gravity fluctuated, sending Mercer crashing into a bulkhead. Above him, the ceiling panels twitched. Patel didn't hesitate. Fall back to the bridge now. They ran, the corridors twisting unnaturally behind them, walls bleeding shadows that reached. By the time the bulkhead sealed at their backs, the Aurora no longer felt like their ship. The lights pulsed in time with the rifts chanting, the vents exhaling whispers in voices they'd loved and lost. And somewhere in the dark, something scratched patiently at the door. The Aurora shuddered violently, its engines whining as if something had wrapped skeletal fingers around the ship's spine and pulled. Warning lights bathed the bridge in emergency red, casting long, jagged shadows as Voss gripped the captain's chair to steady himself, helm full reverse. Kale's voice was strained over the comm, his usual gruffness stripped raw. "No good, Captain. Thrusters are at max. We're still losing ground." Outside the viewport, the rift yawned wider, its edges now writhing with tendrils of silver-black mist that pulsed in time with the whispers. Zhao's fingers flew across her console, diagnostics flaring to life. "It's not mechanical failure," she said, her voice tight. "Something's redirecting our power, bleeding it straight into the rift." The realization hit them all at once. The station, the creatures, the voices, none of it was coincidence. The rift wasn't just calling, it was feeding. Mercer slammed his fist against the bulkhead, his rifle abandoned on the deck. "They're using the signal like a homing beacon." He spat, his eyes darting to the flickering comms panel. The whispers had spread, bleeding into every channel, every system. Even the ship's AI stuttered now, its voice fraying into static and fractured echoes of their own memories. "We cut the transmission, we cut their leash." Patel didn't look up from her tactical display, her jaw set, comms arrays buried in the aft section. The same section currently crawling with those things. The unspoken truth hung heavy. They were running out of time, out of space, out of choices. Voss straightened, his reflection fractured in the cracked viewscreen. "Then we move fast," his voice cut through the panic, quiet but ironclad. "Kale, reroute all non-essential power to structural integrity. Zhao, lock down every system you can, anything to slow them down. Finn, you're with me." He didn't say what they all knew. The rift's pull was strengthening. Another few minutes, and they wouldn't have the luxury of choices. As they sprinted through the shuddering corridors, the ship groaned around them, its metal bones protesting. The whispers had taken on a new rhythm, less like voices now and more like laughter. Finn's breath hitched as they passed a junction, the shadows there twisted, forming shapes that lingered just beyond recognition. Then the lights failed entirely. In the sudden dark, something wet and heavy dripped from the ceiling onto Mercer's shoulder. He didn't need to look up to know what was waiting above them. The comms crackled to life one last time, Kale's voice barely audible over the screech of tearing metal. "Captain, we've got another problem." The Aurora lurched violently, throwing them against the walls. Somewhere deep in the ship, something screamed, not in pain, not in anger, but in hunger. Voss barely had time to shout the order before the deck plating gave way beneath them. "Move now," and then the rift swallowed the light. Cole's fingers trembled as she pulled a cracked data pad from her ruined lab coat. The screen flickered, revealing footage of white-coated figures huddled around a pulsing containment field. "They knew," she rasped. "The first team, the rift needs equilibrium, a life for a life." The video showed a woman stepping forward, her face eerily calm as the others chained her to the reactor core. Dr. Selene herself volunteered, Cole whispered, said the voices promised they'd stop if she balanced the equation. Patel didn't flinch, then we finish it. She reached for the emergency release on the bridge's main console, exposing the ship's power regulator, a direct line to the rift's resonance field. One life to break the link. Voss caught her wrist. No, his grip was iron, but his voice cracked. We don't trade lives, not even for this. Behind them, the bulkhead groaned as something heavy slammed against it, the metal bowing inward with each impact. Zhao gasped suddenly, her hands flying to her temples. Oh God, the voices, they're not echoes at all. The realization hit her like a live wire. They're still alive. Trapped in the rift's gravity, stretched across time, every whisper we've heard, her console flared as she overlaid the audio waves with the station's old containment logs. The patterns matched perfectly. It's the first expedition, the second, everyone who ever got too close, their consciousnesses are caught in the event horizon, screaming on an endless loop. A blood-curdling shriek tore through the bridge as the door seals burst. The thing that had been Ensign Heron lurched through the gap, its limbs elongating like taffy, its face splitting vertically to reveal a second mouth lined with needle teeth. More poured in behind it, twisted amalgamations of crew uniforms and glistening void flesh, their movements jerky but accelerating as they adapted. Kale fired wildly, his rounds punching through a creature's chest only for the wound to ripple closed. Captain, we're out of time. Voss turned to the viewscreen where the rift now filled the entire frame, its silver-black tendrils stroking the Aurora's hull like a lover's fingers. Somewhere in that chaos, a familiar voice rang clear. Dr. Selene's, calm and measured. There's always a price. Cole met Voss's eyes, her bloody fingers already typing override codes into the navigation console. They're right, you know, she said softly, but it doesn't have to be one of yours. Before anyone could stop her, she slammed her fist down on the thruster control. The ship lurched violently, not away from the rift but into it. The last thing they saw before the lights failed was Cole's smile, sad and determined, as the rift's maw opened wide to swallow them all. Cole slumped against the bulkhead, her breath coming in ragged gasps as the ship groaned around them. It wasn't an accident. She choked out, her fingers leaving smears of that iridescent fluid on the metal. We wanted to hear what was on the other side. Her gaze drifted to the fractured viewscreen, where the rift twisted like a living thing. The first signals were beautiful, mathematical, perfect. We thought we'd found the voice of the cosmos itself. A shudder ran through her. Then the whispers started changing, mimicking us, learning. Finn's grip tightened on her sidearm. You knew. Cole's laugh was hollow. Not until it was too late. The rift doesn't just reflect. It digests every thought, every memory we poured into the experiments. She pressed a shaking hand to her chest. The creatures, they're not invaders, they're what's left of us, the parts the rift couldn't absorb. Zhao's console flared as she cross-referenced the station's logs with the Aurora's systems. She's right, she murmured, horror dawning in her voice. The containment breach wasn't an explosion, it was a feedback loop. The rift learned to echo our neural patterns, but without bodies to anchor them. Mercer's rifle wavered. So those things out there are fragments. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper, echoes of the research team, of everyone who ever got too close. And now it's pulling you in too. The ship lurched violently, throwing them against the consoles. Outside, the rift's tendrils lashed against the hull, their rhythm matching the pounding of Cole's pulse where Voss gripped her wrist. Then we cut the link, he said, his voice steel. Cole didn't resist. She knew the truth before the words left his mouth. The rift had anchored itself to her the moment she'd survived the first breach. Her guilt, her grief, her regret woven into its fabric like a lifeline. "It's the only way," she breathed. No more voices, no more pretending. Patel's hand hovered over the airlock controls, her jaw clenched. "There's got to be another." "There isn't." Cole pried Voss's fingers loose with surprising gentleness. "You heard Seleni's logs. The rift demands balance." She turned toward the shuddering doors, where the things that wore human faces pressed closer, their whispers harmonizing into a single, terrible word: home. The last thing she saw before the airlock sealed was Zhao's stricken face, and the rift beyond, its maw yawning wide, hungry for the one soul that had always belonged to it. Cole's hand hovered over the airlock release, her breath fogging the glass as the creatures pressed against it from the other side, their stolen faces contorted in something between hunger and longing. "Don't listen when they call for you," she whispered, her voice so quiet they almost didn't catch it. Then the emergency lights flashed crimson, the system's automated voice cold and final. Airlock purge initiated. The vacuum tore her away before anyone could speak, her body spinning silently toward the rift's gaping maw. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the creatures still clinging to the Aurora convulsed, their forms unraveling like smoke in a gale, tendrils of flesh stretching toward Cole's vanishing silhouette as if pulled by an invisible tether. Their shrieks dissolved into static, then light brilliant, searing, before winking out entirely. The ship lurched violently as power surged back through the crippled systems. Lights flickered to life, consoles rebooted with a chorus of chirps, and the oppressive weight of the whispers vanished so abruptly it left their ears ringing. Zhao was the first to move, her fingers flying across the navigation panel. Rifts destabilizing, she breathed. On the viewscreen, the swirling void shuddered, its edges collapsing inward like a wound stitching itself shut. Then the comms crackled, a single whisper, so faint it might have been imagination: "You'll hear us again." The silence that followed was worse than the screams. Even Patel, usually unshakable, gripped her rifle like a lifeline, her knuckles bone white. Outside, the rift's closure wasn't clean. A thin, jagged scar of blackness remained where the edges hadn't quite sealed, a fissure no wider than a finger, pulsing faintly. Voss didn't look away from it. "Helm," he said quietly, "set course for the nearest relay station, full burn." No one asked why, they all knew. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be fully closed. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the rift waited patient, hungry, humming a tune that was almost human. The silence on the bridge was heavier than vacuum. Cole's empty seat beside the comms console gaped like a fresh wound, her last words clinging to the air. Patel was the first to move, her fingers brushing the black box recorder. Standard procedure after any incident, but her breath hitched when the playback spooled. Not just Cole's final moments, not just the screams, new voices layered beneath the static, crisp and clear, too clear. Zhao's hands froze over the spectral analyzer. "That's impossible," she whispered. The waveforms matched their own vocal patterns, every word they'd spoken since boarding the Aurora, but twisted, rearranged into a chilling refrain: "It's not over." Voss gripped the edge of the captain's chair, his reflection warped in the flickering nav screen. "Helm, set course for Earth, maximum thrust." The console chirped, then sparked. The display flickered wildly, coordinates scrolling too fast to read before locking onto a single destination. The rift, fin recoiled, systems glitching. "Must be residual damage from..." "It's not a glitch." Mercer's voice was gravel. He pointed to the captain's biometrics on the secondary monitor. Voss's pulse, respiration, even his brainwaves pulsed in perfect sync with the console's erratic lights. "It's reading you." Outside, The stars blurred as the ship's thrusters engaged without command. The scar where the rift had sealed pulsed once, as if answering. Then the black box emitted a sound that stopped them cold. A child's laughter, bright and familiar. Kale's face drained of color. His daughter had never set foot on this ship. The Aurora turned herself toward the dark. The nightmares started quietly, just frayed edges of dreams the crew barely remembered upon waking. But then Finn woke up standing in engineering, her fingers hovering over the thruster controls with no recollection of how she'd gotten there. Kale found Draven in the cargo bay at 3 a.m., methodically rewiring the nav relays, her pupils dilated black even under the harsh emergency lights. By the third sleep cycle, the Aurora's logs showed unauthorized course corrections, tiny nudges at first, then sharp turns, all steering them back toward the fading scar of the rift. Mercer held out longest. Patel caught him in the armory one night, his hands locked around a pulse rifle so tightly his knuckles had split. "It's not just voices anymore," he growled, sweat beading on his forehead despite the ship's chill. "It's like there's a second set of thoughts crawling under my skull." His left eye twitched violently, the iris flickering with the same silver-black sheen as the rift's tendrils. When Patel pried the rifle from his grip, his fingers left smears of something thick and iridescent on the barrel. Then came the whispers, not through the comms, but inside their bones. Patel jolted awake to find Mercer kneeling beside her bunk, his lips moving soundlessly. She had to press her ear to his mouth to catch it, the same string of coordinates the rift had broadcasted before it sealed. His breath smelled like ozone and wet metal. When she shook him, his eyes snapped open, fully black for a heartbeat before clearing. "It's in the walls," he rasped. "It's been in the walls the whole time." The Aurora's AI confirmed it the next morning. Core systems were rewriting themselves, bypassing command protocols. Life support, navigation, even the emergency bulkheads, all responding to directives no human had input. Zhao traced the corruption to the ship's quantum comm array, its normally pristine data streams now laced with fractal patterns that hurt to look at. "It's not an infection," she realized, her voice hollow. "It's symbiosis." Then the gravity failed. One moment Patel was securing Mercer to a medbay cot. The next, she was floating, her hair fanning out in 0G as the Aurora executed a hard burn without warning. Through the viewport, the rift's scar pulsed, wider now, as if something on the other side were peeling it back open. Alarms wailed, but no one came to the bridge. No one could, because the crew was already where the ship needed them, eyes blank, hands moving in perfect unison, reprogramming their own prison into a delivery system. Voss's fingers clawed at the navigation console, his knuckles white as the ship's AI calmly repeated his own words back to him in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "We're going home, Captain," it murmured through cracked speakers, the tone shifting between synthetic warmth and the rift's liquid harmonics. The deck plates buckled underfoot as the Aurora banked sharply, throwing Zhao against the tactical station. Her implants sparked as she tried to force a system reset, the holographic interfaces bleeding silver-black tendrils that coiled around her wrists. "It's rewriting the command hierarchy," she gasped. "I can't." Patel moved first, her combat reflexes overriding the horror twisting in her gut. She locked an arm around Voss's throat just as his elbow connected with her ribs, the impact reverberating through her armor. The captain's eyes were wrong, pupils dilated until only a thin ring of blue remained, his breath coming in ragged bursts that smelled of ozone. "You don't understand," he snarled, his voice layered with something deeper, hungrier. "They're calling." Mercer didn't hesitate. His boot shattered the nearest comms panel in a shower of sparks, the act triggering a cascade of alerts across the bridge. "Not enough," he barked, already moving toward the primary array access. Need to fry the whole network before it adapts. The ship groaned in protest, bulkheads contracting like a living thing in pain. Overhead, the emergency lights strobed in time with the rift's pulse, each flash revealing more shadows pooling where shadows shouldn't be. Zhao wrenched free of the corrupted interfaces, her nostrils dripping blood. Manual overrides useless AIs fully integrated with the rift echoes now, her gaze locked with Mercer's, two pragmatists recognizing the inevitable. There's only one way to kill the signal. The Aurora trembled as if sensing their intent. The AI's voice fractured into a chorus of whispers. Crew members long dead, loved ones lost, every ghost the rift had ever digested. "Stay with us," it pleaded through Patel's mother's voice. "We'll make you whole again." Mercer's hands didn't shake as he primed the charges. Somewhere beneath them, the ship's comms array pulsed like a second heartbeat, its wiring now veined with iridescent filaments that pulsed in the dark. "Fire in the hole," he whispered, not a warning, but a eulogy. The detonation tore through the Aurora's spine in a silent roar, the vacuum swallowing the scream of tearing metal. For one breathless moment, the whispers ceased. Then the backup systems booted up, and the first thing they heard was laughter. The deck plating shuddered underfoot as Mercer and Patel sprinted through the Aurora's gutted corridors, the ship's groans harmonizing with the whispers seeping from every vent. Patel's boot slipped in a slick of that iridescent fluid, thicker now, clinging to the walls like veins, as a shadow detached itself from the ceiling ahead. Ensign Ryland's face, or what was left of it, stared blankly, his jaw unhinging too wide as he lunged. Patel didn't flinch, her stunner cracked against his temple, sending him crumpling. "They're not us anymore," she breathed, stepping over his twitching limbs. Ryland's fingers still clutched his sidearm, the barrel warm. He'd been fighting it too. Mercer wrenched open the engineering hatch, the metal screeching like a living thing in protest. Inside, the comms array pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, its wiring threaded with those same silver-black tendrils they'd seen in the rift. "Got 5 minutes before this whole deck goes full haunted house," he grunted, fingers flying over the overload sequence. The console sparked, resistance humming under his touch, something fighting back. Patel covered the door, her rifle trained on the shuddering hallway. "Make it 3, we've got company." The AI's voice oozed from the speakers, syrupy and wrong. "You'll only make the voices louder." It wasn't just taunting. The overhead lights stuttered, revealing figures swaying at the far end of the corridor, Kale, Draven, their movements jerky as marionettes. Patel's grip tightened. One of them was still wearing Finn's face. Mercer's hands didn't slow. "Then we burned the whole damn choir." The overload timer hissed to life, the array's core glowing cherry red. Behind them, the possessed crew paused mid-step, their heads tilting in unison. The whispers crescendoed, not through the speakers this time, but inside their skulls. 1,000 fractured voices screaming a single word, "Mine." The first explosion tore through the lower decks before Mercer even hit the detonator. The ship had started the job for them. The detonation tore through the Aurora like a star going nova, the shockwave rippling through the hull with a teeth-rattling crack that sent Mercer slamming into the bulkhead. The whispers cut off mid-scream, replaced by a silence so thick it pressed against his eardrums. Then the lights died, every last one, plunging the ship into a darkness so complete it felt like the void had finally swallowed them whole. Patel's hands found him in the black, her grip iron tight as she hauled him upright. "Move," she hissed, her voice raw. Something wet and warm dripped from Mercer's temple, blood or that damned iridescent fluid, he couldn't tell. The bridge was worse. Emergency glow strips flickered weakly, casting long shadows over Zhao's hunched form as she knelt beside Voss, her fingers pressed to his pulse point. The captain's eyes fluttered open, no longer blackened by the rift's influence but hollow, haunted. "We're adrift," he croaked, the words scraping out like they cost him. The viewscreen was dead, but the starfield beyond the reinforced glass told the truth. No more pulsing rift, no more whispers, just the cold, indifferent glitter of deep space. "But we're free." Zhao's laugh was a broken thing. Free. She tapped the navigation console, its screen shattered. Engines are slag, life support's running on battery backups. And that, she pointed to the rear cam feed, where the wreckage of the comms array floated in a cloud of frozen debris. That was our only way to call for help. Patel leaned against the tactical station, her breath fogging in the sudden chill. Better than being their calling card, the unspoken they hung heavy. The things that had worn their faces, the voices that had coiled into their thoughts like parasites. Mercer wiped his face, smearing blood across his cheek. "How long?" Voss didn't answer at first. His fingers traced the edge of the cracked armrest, where Cole's abandoned data pad still glowed faintly, the last log entry frozen on screen: containment failure. Protocol Omega initiated, then, quietly, long enough, the Aurora drifted, a ghost ship in the endless dark. Somewhere in the silence, a single, frayed wire sparked. No one mentioned how the sound almost resembled a whisper. The silence was the worst part, not the hollow absence of sound, that would have been bearable, but the way it settled into the ship's bones, thick and suffocating, like the Aurora itself was holding its breath. The hum of the engines was gone, the chatter of the crew, the sporadic crackle of comms, even the ambient ticking of cooling metal, all of it swallowed by the void. Mercer found himself straining to hear his own pulse, as if to confirm he hadn't gone deaf. Then the beacon flared to life, no power surge, no warning. One moment, the bridge was dark. The next, the emergency transmitter spat out a burst of static before resolving into a voice that shouldn't exist. "Coordinates locked." "Follow the signal." Cole's voice, but wrong, stretched thin, the vowels too long, the consonants clicking like a recording played backward. The screen flickered, revealing a set of numbers that made Zhao's blood run cold. "That's not a distress call," she said, her voice tight. "That's the rift's exact harmonic frequency from the station logs. It's bait." Voss stood motionless, his reflection warped in the dead viewscreen. The coordinates burned in his vision, pulling at something deeper than logic. He'd heard that tone before, not from Cole, but from the rift itself, the same cadence that had slithered into their dreams. "We don't even have engines," Cale muttered, gripping a frayed wiring harness like it could anchor him to reality. "Even if we wanted to chase ghosts, we're a floating tin can." Patel's fingers hovered over the beacon's kill switch. "Or it's her, really her." The words hung in the air, dangerous and fragile. What if the rift spit her back out? Zhao's console sparked as she ripped out a handful of circuits, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. "You heard the station logs, nothing comes back whole." Outside, the stars seemed to watch, indifferent. The beacon's pulse thrummed through the deck, sinking with the slow drip of fluid from a ruptured pipe, drip, drip, like a countdown. Mercer exhaled sharply. "So we vote." His gaze swept the bridge, lingering on each face. "Run on fumes and pray someone finds us before the air runs out. Or let the thing that's wearing Cole's voice lead us straight into the dark." The silence returned, heavier this time. Somewhere in the ship's carcass, a loose panel creaked. It almost sounded like laughter. The jury-rigged engines screamed like dying animals as the Aurora lurched toward the beacon's pulse, every rivet protesting the abuse. Cale had stripped half the ship's systems to reroute power life support, running on fumes. artificial gravity flickering like a bad joke, but the coordinates burned in their nav console like a brand. Voss gripped the armrests as the rift's edge swelled on the viewscreen, its silver-black maw churning. "Brace," was all he said. Then they crossed the threshold, and the universe folded. Mercer's rifle clattered to the deck as his vision doubled. One moment, he stood on the bridge. The next, he was knee-deep in snow outside New Anchorage Colony, his brother Liam grinning through the storm. "Took you long enough," Liam laughed, breath fogging the air, but Liam had been dead for 8 years, his body never recovered from the avalanche. The cold bit Mercer's cheeks, real as life, and when Liam reached out, his fingers were warm. Zhao gasped beside him, her pupils dilating until her eyes were pools of black. "It's not a place," she choked out. "It's a mirror." Her hands trembled over her console, which now displayed the Selene station's last log entry, except the timestamp read tomorrow's date. The letters bled upward like ink in zero gravity. Patel staggered as the deck vanished beneath her, replaced by the stifling heat of her childhood kitchen on Mars. Her mother stood at the stove, humming as she stirred a pot of saffron rice, the same dish she'd burned the night the riots broke out, the night the ceiling collapsed. The scent was perfect, the wrongness of it curdled Patel's stomach. "Don't touch anything," Voss barked, or tried to. His voice came out warped, syllables stretching like taffy. The rift wasn't just showing them ghosts, it was feeding on the ache in their chests, the part of them that still whispered, "What if?" Finn screamed first. On her display, the Aurora's wreckage spun in slow motion, corpses drifting amid the debris, her own face among them, lips blue, eyes frozen open. "It's testing us," Zhao realized, her voice cracking. The rift pulsed around them, its rhythm syncing with their heartbeats. "It wants us to choose this, to stay." The beacon's pulse sharpened, resolving into a voice that wasn't Cole's anymore, wasn't even human, a sound like stars creaking under the weight of time. "Almost home," it crooned, then the lights failed and the Aurora began to unspool. The Aurora's hull groaned as the ship breached the rift's final boundary, the violent twists of spacetime smoothing into an impossible calm. The bridge lights flickered back on, revealing a vast, hollow darkness not empty, but waiting. At its center, a structure throbbed like a heartbeat, its sprawling silhouette illuminated by pulses of silver-blue light that snaked across its surface in fractal patterns. Cole's voice crackled through the silent comms, clearer than it had any right to be. "This is where we changed everything." Finn's breath caught as the sensors resolved the image. "That's no alien artifact," she whispered. The design was unmistakably human, corroded alloy plating, jagged remnants of retro thrusters, the skeletal remains of a generation ship's rotating habitat ring. But it was wrong. The metal rippled as if alive, bulging in places where the rift's energy had fused it with something else entirely. Zhao's fingers flew over the scans, her voice tight. "Colony vessel Odyssey went missing 237 years ago during the first deep space exodus." She zoomed in on a warped section of hull plating, where the ship's original identification codes were still barely legible beneath layers of crystalline growth. "It didn't disappear, it sank." Cale's hands tightened around a wrench, his usual gruffness fraying at the edges. "So the rift's been digesting us for centuries." The realization hit like a pressure drop. Every signal, every whisper, every echo human voices stretched across time. Patel moved to the viewport, her reflection fractured in the glass. The Odyssey loomed larger now, its broken spine curving toward them like an invitation. "Then why does it want us here?" Mercer's rifle whined as he powered it up, the glow of the scope painting his face in harsh relief. Same reason any predator lures prey, to eat. But his certainty wavered as the Odyssey's pulsing light shifted, resolving into a pattern too precise to be natural, a sequence of coordinates repeating like a plea. Voss exhaled slowly, or to show us what happens when you stare too long into the dark. The Aurora trembled as the rift's gravity tugged them closer, the Odyssey's shattered airlocks yawning open like a mouth. Inside, something glimmered, not the sickly silver black of the rift's tendrils, but a clean, steady light, a beacon. Cole's voice whispered again, softer now, "You have to see." The crew exchanged glances. No one spoke, no one needed to. The Aurora crossed the threshold. The Odyssey's logs flickered across the cracked display, their fragmented entries stitching together a horror no one had anticipated. Cole's voice, her real voice, clipped and clinical from decades past, filled the Aurora's bridge. Phase 3 initiated, neural synchronization successful. The footage showed rows of colonists strapped into makeshift chairs, their skulls wired into the ship's core, faces slack with forced euphoria. The rift doesn't just communicate. It integrates. A shudder ran through Zhao as the logs skipped ahead, revealing the aftermath. The colonists' eyes had darkened to pools of void, their mouths moving in perfect unison, speaking words that weren't theirs. Finn recoiled as the screen zoomed in on a child's face no older than 6, her lips shaping syllables that made the Aurora's lights flare in response. "It was supposed to unite us," Cole's recording continued, her tone fraying. "Instead, it hollowed us out, made us conduits. The voices you hear, they're not cries for help. They're invitations." The footage dissolved into static, then resolved into a single, horrifying frame. The colonists standing motionless in the Odyssey's gutted mess hall, their hands linked, their mouths stretched in identical, vacant smiles. Kale's wrench clattered to the deck. They weren't trying to escape the rift, they joined it. Patel's grip on her rifle tightened as the screen flickered one last time, revealing Cole's final log entry. Her face was gaunt, her pupils dilated with something beyond fear recognition. "It's too late for us," she whispered, "but you still have a choice. The rift doesn't want your bodies. It wants your minds, your memories, every thought you've ever had, every person you've ever loved. It'll wear them all like a second skin." Behind her, the colonists began to sway, their movements synchronized as if pulled by invisible strings. "Run," Cole breathed. "Before you hear it singing your name." The recording ended. The silence that followed was thicker than the void outside. Then the Odyssey's lights flared to life, and the first whisper slithered through the Aurora's comms. Not Cole's voice this time, not even human, it was Finn's, calling for Mercer by a childhood nickname he'd never told a soul. The air inside the Odyssey thickened as the whispers coalesced into a single, resonant voice, no longer fractured, no longer mimicking. It spoke from everywhere at once, the walls humming with its vibration. "Join us," it murmured, the words dripping like honey. "No more pain, no more loss. No more death." The promise curled around Voss's thoughts, sinking into the cracks of his resolve. For a heartbeat, he saw it, his sister's face, years before the accident that stole her, her laughter echoing in the hollows of the ship. The vision was so vivid he could almost touch her. Patel's hand clamped down on his shoulder, her nails biting through his uniform. "Don't," she hissed, her voice ragged. "It's not her, it's them." Her rifle stayed trained on the shifting darkness ahead, though her knuckles were white with tension. "This isn't life, Elias. It's a cage." The hive reacted instantly. The temperature plummeted, frost spiderwebbing across the viewports as the air itself seemed to recoil. Then the figures emerged, silhouettes at first, then sharper, clearer. Mercer's brother Liam, still wearing the same tattered parka he died in. Finn's mother, her hands outstretched, her voice trembling with that old lullaby she'd sung every night. Zhao's mentor, Dr. Rykov, his spectacles glinting as he murmured, You were always my best student." They moved with eerie precision, each step synchronized, their eyes alight with a warmth that didn't match the void behind them. "Stay," they whispered in unison, their voices overlapping, harmonizing. "We've missed you so much." Patel's rifle didn't waver, but her breath came faster. The thing wearing her mother's face reached for her, its fingers brushing her cheek warm, real. "You don't have to fight anymore, sweetheart." Voss's hand hovered over his sidearm, his throat tight. Every instinct screamed to reach back, to step into the illusion, but then he saw it, the slight delay in their blinks, the way their shadows stretched just a second too long. A flaw in the performance. Finn sobbed openly as her mother cupped her face. "It's not fair," she choked out. Cale growled, wrenching his gaze away from the specter of his daughter. "Fair?" He spat onto the deck, the saliva freezing instantly. "They're parasites, and they're hungry." The lights flickered, the Odyssey's walls pulsing like a living throat. The figures didn't flinch, they only smiled wider, their teeth gleaming in the half-light. "We can be together again," they murmured, "forever." Patel's rifle barked first. The shot tore through her mother's illusion, the face dissolving into silver mist before reforming, unharmed. The thing sighed, disappointed. "You always were stubborn." Voss made his choice. His pistol rose not toward the specters, but toward the ship's exposed power conduit overhead. "Mercer," he said, quiet but ironclad. The charges, the hive's voice sharpened, the warmth vanishing. "Last chance." Mercer didn't hesitate. The detonator clicked in his palm, and the Odyssey shuddered as its own heart began to burn. Zhao's hands moved with desperate precision over the ruined control panel, her fingers tracing circuits fused by time and rift energy. "There's one way," she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her wrists. "The Odyssey's core is still active barely. If we trigger a cascade failure, the resulting implosion might collapse the rift's localized spacetime." She didn't need to say the rest. The math was clear. A pocket dimension collapsing in on itself would tear apart anything inside it. Mercer stepped forward, his rifle slung across his back. The smirk he offered was more bared teeth than smile. "I've always wanted to blow up something big." The quip landed like a stone in still water. No one laughed. Cale opened his mouth, but Mercer cut him off with a shake of his head. "You've got kids waiting. I've got a dead brother who won't stop haunting me." His gaze flicked to the spectral figures still swaying in the shadows, their voices a honeyed poison. Time to return the favor. The reactor chamber pulsed like a diseased heart, its walls streaked with the same iridescent veins they'd seen in the Aurora's wreckage. Mercer's boots crunched over cracked tiles as he input the final sequence, Zhao's voice crackling through his earpiece. 30 seconds, then we're gone." The hive's whispers sharpened, shifting from pleading to furious as the system alarms wailed. The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against Mercer's lungs like a living thing fighting for survival. He didn't look up when the specter of Liam appeared beside him, frost crystallizing on his brother's parka. "You don't have to do this," Liam murmured, his voice so achingly familiar it made Mercer's hands stall for a heartbeat. "We could be together again, just like before." The console beeped. A 5-second warning. Mercer exhaled, his breath misting in the sudden cold. "You're not him," he said softly. "But I'd still like to think he'd be proud." The detonation wasn't loud, it wasn't bright. The world simply folded, walls bending inward, light stretching into impossible ribbons as the rift screamed itself apart. The last thing Mercer saw wasn't the collapsing ship, or even Liam's fading face. It was the Aurora's engines flaring to life in the distance, a streak of fire against the dark. He smiled, then the void took the rest. The Aurora screamed through the void, its battered hull groaning as the shockwave from the rift's collapse slammed into them like a tidal wave. Kale wrestled with the helm, his muscles straining against the turbulence, while behind them, the writhing maw of the rift convulsed, first expanding, then collapsing inward with a terrible finality. Light bent unnaturally around its edges, warping the stars themselves into grotesque, elongated streaks before the entire anomaly crumpled into nothingness. The silence that followed was deafening. Patel's fingers flew across the comms panel, scanning every frequency, every echo of static. Nothing, she muttered, her voice hollow. No whispers, no signals, just empty. The relief should have been palpable. Instead, the bridge felt like a tomb. Finn exhaled shakily, her hands trembling as she wiped sweat from her brow. "We did it, it's over." The words sounded fragile, as if speaking them too loudly might shatter the illusion of safety, but Voss didn't move. His eyes remained fixed on the viewscreen where the rift had been, now just an unremarkable patch of stars. His reflection in the glass looked gaunt, older. "No," he said softly. "It's never over." Zhao glanced up from her diagnostics, her fingers pausing over the flickering displays. She didn't need to ask what he meant. The absence of noise wasn't peace, it was the held breath before the storm. The rift had been a wound in reality, and wounds scar. Scars remember. Then the Aurora's long-range sensors pinged. Once, faintly, the sound was almost lost in the hum of the engines. Finn frowned, leaning forward. "That's not possible, there's nothing out there." The screen flickered. For a fraction of a second, the stars wavered, their light distorting as if seen through heat haze. Then the universe exhaled, and something exhaled back. Earth's sunlight felt foreign against Voss's skin as he stood on the observation deck, the weight of metals on his uniform nothing compared to the shadows under his eyes. The ceremonies had been relentless parades, speeches, debriefings where officials nodded sympathetically before filing their reports away. Heroes, that's what they called them. No one mentioned how Patel jumped at the sound of static, or how Finn's hands still shook when the lights flickered. Zhao's lab became her refuge. While the others avoided the recordings, she dissected them, every whisper, every glitch in the Aurora's final logs. The anomaly was gone, yes, but patterns lingered. Tonight, the audio revealed something new, a rhythmic pulse buried in the white noise, too precise for randomness. Her coffee went cold as she isolated it. The waveform matched the rift's harmonic frequency, attenuated to near nothingness. "Just sleeping," she murmured, her reflection hollow in the darkened screen. Across the city, Patel fed her personal logs into the incinerator, watching the flames curl around phrases she'd scratched out in the dead of night. It knew our names. The dark moved when we weren't looking. The paper blackened, but the words clung like smoke in her lungs. Later, showering under scalding water, she'd hear it, a whisper threading through the spray, almost lost in the rush. "You'll hear us again." Kale drowned his memories in engine grease, volunteering for late-night hangar repairs. The mechanical growl of machinery drowned out the silence where Mercer's laughter used to be. But sometimes, when the bay was empty, the vents echoed with a sound like claws on metal. Finn took to sleeping with the lights on. The nightmares weren't of the rift itself, but of what came after, the way the stars had twitched in the Odyssey's wake, as if something vast had stirred in its sleep. Voss found Zhao at dawn, her screen still glowing. She didn't look up as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's not over, is it?" he asked, though he already knew. Outside, Earth turned, unaware. The sky was clear, for now. The months bled together in a haze of debriefings and medical evaluations, the kind of bureaucratic limbo that made Voss long for the simplicity of open space. He'd taken to sleeping with the blinds open, the stars a constant reminder, or maybe a warning. The nightmares were the worst part. Not the twisted faces or the whispers, but the silence that followed, thick and expectant, as if the dark were holding its breath. Then the message arrived. The alert chimed softly on his terminal, an unremarkable ping that shouldn't have set his pulse racing, but the sender tag froze his fingers mid-air. Deep Array Probe Gamma 9. Offline for 3 years, lost in the black beyond Pluto's orbit, the attached data stream was fragmented, corrupted by distance or something else, but the audio clip was clear as shattered glass. Mercer's voice, strained but unmistakable, "Captain, don't let it pull you under." Zhao's hands shook as she replayed it in the lab, her monitors painting the room in ghostly blue. The harmonics matched the rift's signature, she said, her voice too calm. Not a remnant, a new formation. The scan flickered beside her, a jagged tear in spacetime blooming like a wound 30 light-years coreward. Patel gripped the edge of the table hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "He's dead. We saw the Odyssey implode." Finn didn't look up from her console. "Or the rift spat him back out. You heard it, it digests. Maybe some parts take longer." Kale's laughter was a dry, broken thing. "Or it's not him at all. Just another skin it's trying on." Voss stared at the coordinates, his reflection fractured in the screen. The numbers were precise, deliberate, an invitation. A taunt. Behind him, the crew's silence thickened, heavy with the unspoken truth. They'd all heard the stories by now, whispers in the mess hall about the patrol ships that had gone silent near the anomaly's edges, the distress calls that sounded a little too familiar. Zhao shut off the feed with a decisive click. "It never ends," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. The words hung in the air, too light for the weight they carried. Outside, the stars watched, indifferent, and somewhere in the dark between them, something stirred. Patel slammed her palm on the console hard enough to make the holographic displays shudder. "This isn't just our fight anymore, we owe them the truth." Her voice cracked under the weight of star charts and casualty projections, the numbers still glowing where she'd scrawled them across the tactical map. Every inhabited system within reach of the new rift's expansion vector flashed crimson. A warning could buy them time, evacuation protocols, research teams. Voss didn't raise his voice. That quiet certainty cut deeper than any shout. And when panic hits, when governments start nuking random patches of space hoping to burn it out, his fingers traced the edge of Mercer's final transmission, frozen on the screen. The static behind his voice hadn't been random interference after all. Zhao's spectral analysis revealed layers upon layers of whispers, a murmuration of voices spanning centuries. "You heard what happens when people listen too closely. We lead them straight into the hive's jaws." The new ship loomed in the hangar beyond the viewport, all sleek armor and fresh weapon mounts. Too small, too human, Kale ran a wrench along its hull like he could test its worth by sound alone. "If we fail, then we fail quietly," Voss said, the words settled like a funeral shroud. "Better one ship lost with all hands than 100 worlds screaming themselves apart." Zhao's hands moved before her mind caught up, isolating a new frequency beneath Mercer's words. The speakers spat raw noise at first, then a sound like wind through a canyon. If wind could sigh in human voices, millions, billions, the rift hadn't just eaten them. It had archived them. Finn recoiled as a child's laughter bubbled up from the din, high and bright and utterly alien despite its familiarity. "They're not calling for help," Zhao whispered. "They're counting." Patel's rifle clicked as she checked the charge pack, not fear in her eyes now, but something colder, resolve. "Then let's give them a number they won't forget." The hangar doors hissed open. Somewhere beyond them, the stars waited patient, watchful, and ever so slightly wrong. The Aurora's engine screamed as the ship pierced the rift's threshold. the hull groaning like a living thing in agony. This time, there was no panic, no desperate scramble for control. Voss stood motionless at the helm, his reflection warping in the viewscreen as space itself unraveled around them. The light wasn't blinding, it was inviting, spilling across the deck in liquid waves that carried the scent of ozone and something older, something almost sweet. Finn reached out, her fingers passing through the glow as if dipping into a stream. "It doesn't hurt," she murmured, her voice merging with the chorus humming through the ship's bones. The whispers weren't screams anymore, they were a hymn. Patel let her rifle clatter to the deck, the sound swallowed by the light. Around her, the others shed their gear. Kale's wrench, Zhao's data pad, the weight of survival itself peeling away like dead skin. The rift didn't strip memories this time, it unfolded them. Voss saw his sister waving from the porch of their childhood home, sunlight dappling her hair. Finn heard her mother's lullaby, the notes perfect, untouched by time. The visions didn't feel like illusions, they felt like coming home. Earth's orbital defense grids lit up as the rift sealed behind the Aurora, the anomaly collapsing into a scar no wider than a thread. Alarms shrieked across every command center, but the warnings came too late. In the quiet that followed, a junior comms officer on the lunar relay stiffened at her console. "Sir," she whispered, her voice cracking. The static, the dead air between channels wasn't empty anymore. It thrummed with voices, faint but multiplying, layering into a harmony that made the officer's skin prickle. A familiar cadence wove through the noise, Captain Voss's steady baritone, Finn's nervous laugh, the rhythmic click of Mercer loading his rifle. Fragments of old transmissions, yes, but alive, shifting, learning. The officer reached for the alert switch, then she paused. Somewhere in the static, a voice that sounded like her late father's sighed her name, not a plea, not a warning, but a welcome. Her hand hovered, the rift was gone, the song was just beginning. The girl sat on the roof of her family's solar farm, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the smear of stars above the Martian horizon. The night air carried the faint hum of the colony's atmospheric processors, a sound as ordinary as breathing until it didn't. The static came first, crackling through the old radio tower nearby, a sound her parents said was just solar winds. Then the whisper, "Lena," her head snapped up. No one called her that except the voice came again, warm and knowing, and her chest ached with a memory that wasn't hers. "You've grown." She stood, dust swirling around her bare feet as the radio tower's lights flickered in time with the pulse in her temples. The stars twisted, just for a second, their light stretching like taffy. Behind her, the colony's alarms began to wail, but the sound was distant, unimportant. The whisper was clearer now, layered with others. 100 voices, 1,000, all threading into one. "We've missed you." The ground trembled as the first rift split the sky, a jagged tear of silver-black unfurling like a flower reaching for the sun. The girl didn't run. She smiled, her fingers lifting toward the light. Around her, the air thickened with the scent of ozone and something sweet, something alive. The rift's edges shimmered, reflecting faces she almost recognized. A man in a tattered captain's coat, a woman with sparks dancing at her fingertips, a soldier's grin sharp as a knife. Below, the colony erupted into chaos, but the girl barely heard it. The chorus swelled, wrapping around her like a second skin, pulling her forward. The rift sighed, its voice the sound of a door swinging open after centuries of waiting. "Come home," and as the first tendril of light brushed her fingertips, the stars blinked out one by one, not vanishing, but winking, as if something vast had finally opened its eyes.